Coming up next, Spokane Public Schools Board of Directors take your questions on educating Spokane. Welcome to Educating Spokane. I'm Taryn Roloff. Tonight, our Board of Directors is taking questions about Spokane Public Schools. If you have a question, we hope you'll call the number on your screen or email or text us at es@ksps.org. We encourage you to share your name and phone number in case we need to get back to you if time runs short. Our guests from the Board of Directors are President Bob Douthitt.
Good evening, Taryn.
Vice President Jeff Bierman.
Hi, Taryn.
Director Sue Chapin.
Hi, Taryn.
And Associate Superintendent of Spokane Public Schools, Karin Short.
Hi, Taryn.
Welcome to all of you, and Karin, in particular to you, for thank you for filling in for Dr. Stoll tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not here because she's retiring. She is here because she has another commitment. But Director Douthitt, maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about Dr. Stoll's plans.
Sure. Well, tonight she's at an appointment that she had with Montessori parents, I think, for about a year, so she felt she needed to keep that. Mm-hmm. And Karin Short is a walking encyclopedia, so if you have very difficult questions, this is the person to ask them to.
Oh dear.
But we're going to miss Dr. Stoll. She's been in this district, I added it up, 39 years, and she's not embarrassed to admit it was that long. And has really done a tremendous amount for the district, especially the last 10 or 12 years when she was Associate Superintendent and Superintendent. But just a couple of things that I'd want to point out was during her first 4 years as Superintendent, our on-time graduation rate increased 17%. This year we were rated with the State Achievement Index with 75% of our schools as being either good, very good, or exemplary, which is a really, really high percentage to fall into that category. We're one of 3% of the districts in the country to be recognized by College Board as an AP honor roll district for increasing our percentage of students taking AP courses, or our total number of students taking AP courses, and the score at the same time. So usually you'd expect the average score to go down as you're getting more and more students to participate, but that didn't happen with us.
And our demographics.
Yeah,
for
and our
those kids.
demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another thing on that is
great representation.
we have 57% free and reduced lunch in this district, and I think the state's about 43, but yet we have significantly higher percentage of our students going on to college, 64% versus 59% in the state. So all of those things really kind of relate back to work that, focused work in the last several years as superintendent, but a long-term work over the last 10 or 12 years when she took the associate superintendent job to align curriculum, to encourage collaboration, and create basically the concept of instructional leaders in the district, with principals spending about half their time in the classrooms and creating coaches too to act as instructional leaders. So all that focused work has improved achievement in a very good way that I think the district can be proud of. So we're going to miss Dr. Stoll. We've been spending a lot of time on the superintendent search, and I'll quit rambling, but we can come back to that if you want.
I actually think we already have a question about that, so we will come back to that.
Okay.
All right. But what we do at the beginning of each of our shows this year is talk a little bit about the district work plan. And so we do have the graphic up there that talks about how our overarching goal is to educate all students to meet high standards and graduate from high school ready without remediation for post-secondary education. And then there's some things that kind of fall under that we'd like to talk about tonight. I know that we have done that in the past, but tonight I thought we'd focus on the improving math and science preparation and the middle school work. So, Dr. Bierman, maybe you'd like to start off, because I know you have a special interest in certainly in the math and science.
Well, there's certainly some good things going on in middle school, and really trying to, that as you talk about kids graduating college career ready, I mean, you need to backtrack that back through middle school and through elementary so that you've got a trajectory that's going to lead to kids being, college and career ready upon completion of studies here in our Spokane Public Schools. And some of that work's going on this year in middle school. We've added foreign languages throughout all the middle schools, I believe. At each middle school now, Spanish is available. Some additional curriculum in mathematics in 7th and 8th with the algebra courses, trying to place some more emphasis on some procedural skills and to couple with the conceptual development that we have going on now. So that work's happening. I don't know if you want to comment some more on some of the specifics.
Well, and I think not too long ago we changed the trajectory from a more integrated approach to currently we offer middle level math 1, middle level math 2, algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. So what is unique about that in our middle level is that some of our 7th graders actually are taking algebra, which is a giant leap from where we have been in the past, and they're doing very well. Overall, I think we have something like an 86% pass rate in algebra, taking the state test, so we're pretty proud of our efforts in that regard. And last year we had almost 99% of our students in geometry, the second course, from 8th grade, passing that state test. That's pretty outstanding achievement. So all in all, I think we've really added and produced a little more rigor, and certainly the addition of some additional materials at 7th grade in math have made a difference.
And that really was one of the drivers for adding the algebra for 7th graders, was seeing how well 8th graders were able to do in the algebra course and on the state assessment. That really did indicate that these kids are ready for more challenge and that we can start that even earlier.
I was in a classroom, well, several classrooms today at Glover, along with Principal Schulheiser, and it is pretty amazing what those kids are able to do, and the staff is very excited. I feel very comfortable about the selection of the materials, and kids are progressing quite well, and it's almost second semester, believe it or not.
Okay,
That's great.
I know another topic that you folks have been really interested in is the end of social promotion at the middle school. So before we move on to our first question, maybe you'd like to address that a little bit.
Sure. We've, for years actually, children who failed at the middle school level, in spite of failing, were moving on to the next grade level and moving on without the skills they needed to be successful. And what ultimately that did was land kids in high school who really weren't ready for the rigor of high school classes and didn't really understand the concept of needing to earn a credit. And so we had kids in 9th grade who were failing classes, and the only outcome was going to be they couldn't graduate on time, because in the state of Washington, to earn a diploma, you need a certain number of credits, and you only got 4 years to do that. And so that's part of, the looking back, saying if we want kids to be college and career ready, here's one of the practices that has to end. We need kids to be ready for what they face in high school. And so we've got a program at the middle school level now to help kids who aren't successful. We've talked about providing things, courses that are challenging for kids that are ready for that challenge, but we also need to support those students who need a little extra time, need to see it again, or need to see it a different way, so they gain the same education and level of understanding and can be successful. And the program's called I Can, and individual course attainment now. And so, when students start to fail, they're together with their families. There's a lot of discussion that goes on with the student and their family at the school. They're placed into it's more intensive looking back at what skills they need to master in that specific class, whether it's math or English. Those are the two subject matter courses that we do this in. And so they have to work to gain those skills and meet those objectives. And it's not optional.
Mm-hmm. And it also gets some assistance from the virtual learning.
Absolutely.
teachers.
Students work with a classroom teacher, and they also have online instruction. And to bring them up to where they need to be so they can move forward.
And it really does tie back to that graduation rates and trying to improve the outcomes for students in our
Absolutely.
district, because it's not just making it more difficult to fit in all the classes during 4 years, but when you looked at data, if a student comes into 9th grade and failed a class in that first semester, it was over a 50% chance, 60% chance that they'll drop out.
Yeah.
And if they failed 2 classes, it went up to like 90%, I think.
Yeah,
and
it's
and
almost
so
certain.
failing 1 or 2 courses in 9th grade was set the path that a student ended up going down. And we're trying to avoid that now. We've added a lot of programs to try to help kids who've maybe disengaged, but were still okay academically. They just weren't in the right kind of program, and we've had great success there. And now we're trying to make sure that we've got programs in place for students who are struggling a little academically and, like you said, need that extra work. And we need to do that as early as we can so that they're ready by the time they get to 9th grade and don't have that initial failure that is so difficult to recover from.
I think there are really 3 main ideas around that. One is the community support to end social promotion and make sure kids are ready, much as you say. So that pipeline assures a better chance that kids who enter 9th grade are going to graduate from school on time, high school on time. Second is the board of directors really looked at that, and you all made that commitment to the resource so that system-wide we're providing ICANN at every one of our schools. Just to give you an idea, quarter, we had 267 across our city failures in either math or reading at 7th or 8th grade. So that's 2 grade levels, 4 content areas, or 4 areas, 4 courses in particular. We have kids right now, 120 of them, engaged in ICANN to make up that proficiency. And we've already have something like 20 kids who've cycled through it. So we're really encouraged that this may be a real help. It certainly isn't for absolutely every one of our students, but for those who are participating, it seems to be really making an impact on parents, on students, and on the school.
And it's really important, like you said, you can't just tell families or tell kids, look, go do it.
Right.
We're providing those support structures and putting programs in place for families to be able to take advantage of to help those students move forward. So,
And it's required. That's the third thing.
And in addition to gaining the academic skill, the student is also learning the concept of what it means, what amount of effort they need to put in so they pass a class. This is, it's preparing them in that way for high school too.
It means something.
It means something.
All right.
I just want to have one caveat to that,
Okay.
though. I mean, because I think, or at least on my personal opinion, is that the ICANN program probably is not going to be the answer for all
No.
the students. And because there's going to be a segment of the population that's failing, and what the ICANN program does, that I see anyway, is it shows that there is a consequence of if you fail or don't fail. And so for those students that may have just decided to blow off going to class or doing their homework, this says you've got to do the work. And the ICANN program, I'm expecting, will enable hopefully a large number of those students to actually be able to acquire the skills. Because prior to this, we didn't really have real-time interventions where as soon as they fell behind, there was something that they could do to make it up. So that is an innovation that we devoted some money to, and I'm thinking, it's paid off some at the high school level, and it will do so at the middle school level. Nonetheless, I sort of anticipate that there will be students that are trying hard in the ICANN program, and just because of the trajectory of their academic careers, it's going to be hard to acquire all those skills in that 2-year period. There's a number of students that start off with 1s on the MSPs in 3rd grade, and
Measured student progress.
and it goes all the way through, and it's hard to make all that up in
Right.
7th and 8th. And so
Yeah.
how to handle that and give them the best shot at getting through high school, that's
Still a
sort of the
challenge.
next step of the challenge.
I think just 2 things, and then probably
Yeah,
you want
what
to
do you
change subjects. There are all kinds of probably interventions going on. President Douthitt, it is probably, though, the first system-wide intervention that we're offering around the city.
Right.
And the second is that, as we all have agreed, ICANN isn't the answer for all of what we are facing. For some kids, it's the perfect answer. So it's new, it's our first quarter, and we'll report back as we learn more.
All right, let's get to our first question. We did have about 4 come in before this show started. So the first question is, how much of administrative pay comes from the levy? And Jason called that in.
I'm not sure if I've got a dollar number, but I believe the information we'd seen prior and had out in the paper was like 140 administrative positions out of 140, like 37 of them, 30 some of them were funded entirely out of the levy. Those are additional positions for different programs within the system. And then on top of that, the state allocates a certain amount for administrative salaries, and it doesn't cover the full salary for any administrator, I think, in any district in the state. And so the difference is funded out of the levy as well, and that would vary from person to person.
Okay.
I think one thing, though, sometimes people hear the number 140 or 141, whatever it is, and assume that those are all people at a downtown office. Mm-hmm. But when you use the word administrator, I hope people understand that includes the principals from all 50 of our buildings, the vice principals, that level too. So we don't just have 141 mm-hmm. administrators downtown. These are people that are actually working with kids and involved in operating the schools.
Mm. So. Very good. Okay. So we've had a call just now from Ed saying, why does the state consider transportation part of basic education?
Well, I'm not sure they do.
Actually, they don't. That's
I think Governor Gregoire in her budget proposal this year also listed an all cuts budget and listed some additional places that they could go for cuts, she felt, if needed, and transportation for students, the busing of students, the state support for that was on that list. The opinion was that that's not part of basic education, and that if the legislature and governor agreed, they could decrease or remove the funding for that. Mm-hmm. I think there's requirements for special ed transportation, mm-hmm. But the general transportation, the Durham buses that are running the majority of kids to schools, that's not part of basic education.
And in fact, it's funded by the levy.
We get a substantial portion from the state, but the state underfunds mm-hmm. that, mm-hmm. and the difference comes out of our levy, and it's mm-hmm. quite a bit. That actually, a big chunk of that is special ed transportation that mm-hmm. state and federal sources doesn't fully fund, that we pay out of the levy as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just say, the term basic education gets very confusing because in 2009, the legislature passed a bill 2261, which expanded the definition of basic education so that it would include things like art teachers. I think it included an allocation for transportation, art teachers, nurses, guidance counselors, all those things would be in the new definition. However, in the definition that the legislature's been operating under, which the Supreme Court just said was inadequate, those things were not in it. So when you read the paper, you have to read it carefully to see what context that term is being used and who's using it.
All right, let's move on. Another question that came via phone. Does Spokane Public Schools keep 5% of the budget in an unassigned category? And if so, why? This is somebody who knows.
Maybe referring to the fund, the
fund balance. Okay.
Which some of that is unallocated, and some of it is allocated for particular expenses throughout the year. But the main reason we maintain that 5% fund balance is because that's that's one of the identification marks that credit rating agencies look at for healthy institutions. That balance, that's basically the district savings account. So when something unexpected happens, such as a mid-year reduction from the state legislature that would put a district into trouble otherwise, districts are supposed to have a little bit of savings that they can turn to take care of those problems. 5%'s not a lot, and it's kind of at the minimum of what credit rating agencies are expecting us to have.
Yeah, and frankly, about half of that is allocated to fund certain things. So it's just at the end of the day or at the end of the year to have 5% cash, 5% of whatever your budget was. That's what the credit agencies want to see, even though maybe 2.5% or 3% of it is obligated to be paid for something.
Okay.
And if people wonder why we care what the credit agencies think about us, it's because of the bonds that the voters pass, that we sell at market, and to build the schools. We get a much better bond rating, which allows more of the voter-approved money to go actually to the school. And so it's very important for us to keep a good bond rating.
Just on the flip side of that, I was at a meeting with Ross Hunter, who's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee last Friday. He said that under the proposals that had been basically floated around prior to this Supreme Court decision, which would most of them would be cutting half of levy equalization, which is what they were talking about doing, and may still cut some of it, I don't know. They estimated 40 or 50 districts were going to go under this year because they didn't maintain that balance.
Which is the point that this is a long-standing operational decision for Spokane Public Schools.
Yeah.
In fact, in former years, it was much higher than 5%.
Just to be sure, the caller, since there was the 5% number, I assume the caller was talking about that fund balance, but it could have been referring to the contingency fund. That the fund balance is a carryover that we expect to have year over year. In this year's annual budget, we did have a contingency fund. It's only 1% of the total budget, and the purpose of that is for items that vary from one year to another. If we had an exceptionally cold winter, heating bills went up, change in diesel prices, staffing mix, more students, that we'd have an annual account that we could go to for those orders. But that's only 1% of our total budget.
So we have a half-hour format here, so we want to move right along. Another question that came in earlier: I thought it was illegal for the district to promote the levy, yet I've noticed in schools people are wearing buttons. Can you explain? Says Mike.
Sure. Freedom of speech. I think it's been considered and decided that the wearing of a button is just simply an individual's expression of freedom of speech, and so that's allowed. What's not allowed is our district employees to vocally advocate for the levy or anything like that, to use district resources to advocate for the levy, other than informational as we do as a district.
Yeah, basically the rules are on your own time you can do whatever you want. Anytime you can wear a button, but other than that you cannot use district resources
To promote. But you can use district resources to inform.
Right.
So, all right. Okay, another question that came in earlier. What's the difference between the Academic Achievement Index and adequate yearly progress?
Well, adequate yearly progress is a consequence of the federal government No Child Left Behind. It's the reauthorization of ESEA, from the last reauthorization. We're supposed to be reauthorized this past year, but that didn't happen because of all the political, the nature of the budget and everything else that's going on at a national level. So that is one set of circumstances with a very stringent set of criteria in order to judge a school as in step 1, 2, or 3, or 4.
But it's federal.
It's federal.
It's a federal.
The index, Washington State, every state generally, has a way of organizing its schools by performance, and it is state generated. It also has a very different set of criteria than the national criteria. In fact, I think there are seven different criteria in the state that each score there is a score for each of those 7 different criteria for every school in our state.
And that's what Director Douthitt was referring to at the very beginning. 75% of our schools are either rated this year, either good, very good, or exemplary.
We have 5 exemplary. That's really, I think, almost more than any other district in the state.
If but the way the Achievement Index would be used is if you had a school that was, I'm not sure how bad it would have to be, but the state wants to be able to have the opportunity to come in and rescue a struggling school or struggling district. They'd be using the criteria in their Achievement Index.
That's correct, the
what
5 lowest percent.
And then they'd also like to be able to have the federal government use that for determining whether any of the federal sanctions are imposed, but they're in the process of negotiating that.
Okay.
So simple answer. Achievement Index is a state measurement, and AY is a federal measurement.
Yeah.
And going back to what you were saying, Karin, not only is 5 a lot of exemplary for this year in the state, but I understand that the fact that we have 3 high schools
That's
out of our 5
unique.
comprehensive high schools is unheard of. So
We're
anyway,
pretty proud of that.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So this one just came in as an email. Does the system have a strategy to engage parents? If so, what is it? Says Carol.
Well, I think there are any number of community engagement, parent engagement strategies at the school level. If you're a Title I LAP school, those are state funds and federal funds that come into the district and then ultimately to the schools. There's a requirement for parent involvement. In fact, 10% of those funds are allocated for parent involvement activities about, how to help your child with academics. There are a variety of other opportunities that anything from our, I think Director Chapin would call ball sports, so booster clubs,
Booster clubs, yeah.
all kinds of parent activities around that, anything that has to do with their children
But
in a
most
school
of
setting.
the vast majority are school-based, through your PTGs, your principals advisory committees. But then we also have district-wide committees where we have lots of parent involvement through our Citizens Advisory Committee, Human Growth and Development, Diversity Advisory Committee. Not all of those are parents. Some are general community members. But I think we put a lot of effort into trying to get parent involvement. And individual schools have extra activities like reading nights where they invite parents and
Conferencing,
conferencing.
student-led conferencing.
Math nights.
Math
That's
nights.
been a fairly new.
Yeah.
But I think the caller's got a good point. I think that we're looking at, or to some degree we're looking at everything. Most of the parental involvement has been initiated at the school level. At a district-wide level, probably that's something we need to be thinking about. And one thing where we've done some really great creatively new work, I think, is with the work Fred Schrumpf is doing with community organizations on a district-wide level, in conjunction with Priority Spokane, and trying to figure out which of our needs in the schools match up with which different community organizations. And you might have 12 community organizations aimed at almost the same thing. And in this work with Priority Spokane and that Fred's doing, we're figuring out how to funnel that in a more concentrated way that'll be pretty good, I think.
All right. Well, we are actually just about out of time. We don't have time to talk about the superintendent search, so do that next time. We would be remiss not to talk about the deadline for registering to vote because we do have a levy coming up on February 14th. And the deadline to to register online is this Monday at, I believe, midnight. So that would be January 16th. And then folks can still walk into the election office and still do it that way for a couple of more weeks. But do encourage folks to go onto that website and get in to register by February 6th, actually, if you're doing it in person. Any closing comments? We just have a few seconds left. Appreciate the interest tonight.
I'll just say, closing comments, there will be an online forum for everybody to give input on the superintendent search January 16th to February 3rd.
Very good.
You'll be publicizing that.
Perfect. That's good. And really appreciate the support we get from our community. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. And have a great rest of your evening. Good night.